up my groove today. Been watching race guys move away. I just don't think that I can lose, and I might just take a cruise and let the sunshine play. Something more, something new, something new.
What's up, everybody? We're back for late October edition of the Approach podcast. Got powered by FanShare, but we got Drew here. Drew, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Welcome back. Another week, another one that we're going to have to dive a little deeper into this week than normal. But hey, happy to be back. More golf. I'm excited about golf that I'm going to be able to watch. I'm excited about a cut, which seems strange. But yeah, no, it'll be good to kind of get back to some normal golf. I got to see 0 golf shots last week, which was strange. So I'm excited to get back into it.
Yeah, I didn't watch one golf shot, especially with the Ortiz's news. I had a lineup that was just in great position and still finished, I can't remember, but in 100th or something, with Ortiz not getting any points round 3 or 4. And so all my guys outside of Ortiz finished in the top 10 or 15. It just, I would have killed it. I had Matsuyama, Steele, a bunch of others. So tilting. But we get we actually get a great DFS tournament this week, and we'll get into more of that. Not so good betting, but it's going to be fun. The tournament finishes on Halloween. What are you and your family doing Halloween this year? Trick-or-treating?
Yes. So we'll be doing some trick-or-treating with the 2 little kids. We're actually having 20 so people over, do a little gathering. I wish it fell on Saturday, but it's nice. We'll have a good time. You got you got any plans for you on Halloween? You handing out some candy?
Yeah, we live on the street that gets a whole lot of traffic for Halloween. About over 100 trick-or-treaters. So it gets fun. It gets entertaining. Yeah. We give out treats. We give out adult treats too. So some fun libations for the parents, because we know that they need it. And so that'll be we'll get a good thing cooking there. But anything you just want to wrap up with the Zozo last week? Congrats to Hideki. Won a home game for him. He deserved it after your kind of duel with Tiger there a few years ago. But yeah, any final thoughts?
Yeah, what a year for Hideki. I mean, if you think about it, winning the Masters, he had success in the Olympics, and then to cap it off, winning on home soil, where kind of a week where we read the headlines heading into it, and he said his game was like less than a 1 out of 10, which seems to be a trend that we've seen here in the last 4 months. So if there's a guy that's really down about himself early in the week, you probably want to get behind that. But no, good for Decky to win it. And yeah, to your point, I mean, to finish second, the year before it's with Tiger, in 19 when they played. So yeah, it was good to see him get it done. And again, a heck of a year for him to get the kind of the major monkey off his back and to win on, home soil, which I'm sure was awesome and electric to watch, but I was sleepy.
Yeah. And just going back to about his statements for, playing less than 1 on a scale of 1 to 10. And that's been a thing the last 4 months, because it's getting more popular, which it should, but that's been going on for years. And there's actually some golfers who keep up with strokes gained stats and some who don't. And those who don't have any idea, just like we don't have any idea of which golfer's showing up to the golf course. Now, obviously they know how they're playing better than a lot than we do, but it just goes to show you just can't trust them. And so if you like a guy, you got to keep riding it. And we'll dive into more, again, DFS wise, because we might come back to a little bit of our roots of the Monday or night DFS night school. We'll bring some of that stuff back. But why don't you tell us about Bermuda, this championship, this tournament? Yeah, what do we know about the course? Yeah, what do we know? What should we expect this weekend?
Yeah, well, and I'm sorry, my kid is snuck in here and is screaming under the table at this point. But no, so we're talking about an extremely short golf course this week. The defense of this or any kind of seaside golf course is going to be what kind of wind we get. I think one of the important things that we look forward to this week, where we don't really necessarily talk about it a whole lot, but I do think it matters, especially from a DFS perspective, is kind of the wave of tee times you get, right? So it looks like the wind is going to be relatively consistent, 25 to 30, especially in the afternoon come Thursday. Well, Friday is supposed to be more of a benign day. So if you get that early Thursday, late Friday tee time, I think that significantly adds value to a guy going out late on Thursday and early on Friday just based off the wind. So the draw definitely does matter. But the golf course itself, again, it's got 6 par 4s that are under 400 yards, which isn't, seen very often. The other thing that the golf course does have to protect it, it has 3 extremely difficult par 3s. One, I believe plays 235. So the golf course itself, the rough isn't necessarily long, but this golf course certainly doesn't favor somebody that hits the ball a long way, right? So we've kind of come back to where you've seen between Brian Gay and Brendan Todd are 2 guys that have won this event. We know that those guys are guys that put the ball in play, and they're not necessarily long off the tee, which in typically any given week, always we talk about distance as being an extreme advantage, but it just doesn't play out like that this week. So again, the wind and the weather are going to be, the deciding factor. Hopefully we see it blow, because that's kind of what this golf course was designed for. Now you see, last year the wind blew. The year before it didn't blow. So you see how there was a 9-shot difference between the 2 years, and it was based off of the weather. But as far as when we're talking about key stats, I do think fairways hit are going to be very important this week, as they really haven't been necessarily. But then when we dial it back, strokes gained putting, this is going to be a putting contest to an extent. There's going to be lots of wedges into the greens, lots of greens hit. So you do look at kind of your Bermuda putting. And so for me, and then we'll break it down like we normally do. You're going to take the 3 par 3s that are over 200 yards. You're going to kind of break down that proximity from 200 to 225, kind of see who's excelling there. And then I hit on the 6 par 4s that are less than 400 yards. So we'll dial in that 350 to 400. You've seen how it is. We can play around with wind conditions when we're kind of messing with these models and building different things. You hope that the forecast it kind of plays out like we're supposed to, but then again, to an extent, it's kind of hard to kind of bank on the wind, right? And we're like, okay, the wind's supposed to blow 30.
Right. Well, it's Monday night, obviously, and so
right.
The forecast. But yeah, check back Wednesday, and there's a lot of people already posting their betting card, and we get it. You get the bets in early in case there's a withdrawal, and so the odds don't kind of get worse. But this is a tournament to wait till the tee times are released to see if you get a advantage with the tee time stack. This is exactly a week to do that. So, and this is serious about the wind. The wind is no joke here, and if you're on the wrong side of a tee time stack, then your odds of winning can go way down. So yeah, I just consider that Wednesday evening.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it'll be interesting. Again, you're talking about a 9-shot differential between one year to the other year, and that's all determined by the wind. And if there's no wind, becomes a pitch and putt for these guys. If there's wind, it's certainly an element where you could even look at players that have the ability to control their trajectory on their golf ball better than other people do. And so that's something you definitely look at. Guys that can hit the ball low and kind of scrap it around are definitely going to be beneficial in the wind. I mean, I know we're at a level where a lot of guys can hit at different trajectories, but some guys like say, for example, like not in this golf tournament, just a name, Joaquin Niemann hits an extremely low ball flight. And so when you see windy conditions, and there's guys in this field, of course, Russell Knox, you've probably heard tons of. He is another guy that kind of hits a low, lazy ball. But those guys are going to be, it's going to be beneficial to them if the wind does kick up. And I do think, you look back at course history, and the other odd thing about this event and the 2 winners, they've been kind of trending like crap coming into the event. Multiple miscuts for both winners. Which is something that we don't see. We always kind of like to look at how people have been playing. A lot of
that could be in place and from the fall swing. Because
that's true.
Guys aren't playing every single week like they are in the spring and summer, and so we talked about it last 2 episodes. Is that when you get these gaps, you see someone kind of MC and then win like a Todd, or guys show up like a Gay. Well, there's a lot that can happen within, even taking in 2 weeks off, 3 weeks off. So we'll kind of dive in more of that within the strategy. But yeah, it makes sense, and it's what we've been saying.
I'm with you, man. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, well, good deal. And like you said, 100% agree. And any type of golfer can kind of win here, but with your kind of background and PGA teaching, that if you're hitting the ball better, if you're ball striking it better, it's going to kind of stay within the wind better than if you're, have a little side spin on the ball. So if you're striking it well, the wind's going to have less of influence. If you're not confident in your swing, the wind's going to grab it.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not catching it in the center of the club face, the wind exaggerates everything 10 times, right? Mm-hmm. When if you're hitting the ball on the screws, it's a more penetrating ball flight that can kind of work through the wind. But yeah, if you're a little bit off and you're not catching the center of the face, all of a sudden, you hit a cut that normally would go 10 yards right. Now we're looking at 30 to 35 yards right. And although it's a resort style golf course, it's not necessarily extremely penal off the tee. Right. It's definitely, it's a great point. I mean, it's definitely going to exaggerate your bad misses, and solid ball strikers are the ones that tend to rise to the top in windy conditions.
No doubt, and that can make around the green even a little more important. But this is such a great DFS tournament for a lot of reasons, and I think I mentioned it on Twitter. It's likely going to make you or improve your DFS skills if we're being mindful while making lineups through this week. And Drew, you interrupt anytime you kind of want. But it first starts that we have a lot of players, whether they're old, and I say old comparative. I know we'd be old if we were out on tour, but let's just say more seasoned players, then also some extremely young guys that are still on the Korn Ferry Tour, like the Woo brothers. I know they're not really brothers, but that's if you listen to the show, that the Woo guys. And so there's not a lot of back class or back performance that we can kind of analyze and get strokes gained data. And so that kind of gives us less bias on or biases on particular player. There's one service out there that has an anti-bias mode. When you're doing your modeling, it's anti-bias mode. It just changes all the names to something random. And you think, okay, why is that important? Because we can kind of get unhealthy attachments to specific golfers, and we get bad habits within those golfers. So one thing we can kind of get into or talk ourselves into players like, gosh, this guy is due for a win, or we see it all the time. We have a golfer here who's burned us in the past, so we think, gosh, they're blacklisted, can't play them. And so now we get so many unknown names, so many guys we're not used to playing, we're not used to talk about, we're not used to betting, we're not used to researching. And that kind of gives us a clean slate with no attachments. And so we should go into this obviously thinking, how do I make GPP lineups? But it should be easier this week because we're less likely to have, those narratives that can kind of get us into trouble, or previous attachments to specific golfers. I mean, just saying that, Drew, do you agree, or what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when we talk about it, and it's kind of cool, and I haven't seen that where you can build a model and just basically throws names in, because there's certainly, we have recency bias when we talk about golfers. To your point, we blacklist this guy, we played this guy, he played bad, or hey, this is a name that we know is a highly regarded golfer, so we want to try to squeeze him into our lineup. Well, this week we're kind of playing with a fresh slate. To your point, there's golfers in this tournament that have been around forever, and you have a bunch of young KFT guys. And I think it's a great mix. And I think that you definitely, to an advantage, if you've watched these guys, you become familiar with them. And this week is going to help you in the future as well, because these are going to be names that are going to continue to kind of come up on the radar. And they're actually going to be extremely more valuable, maybe not even this week, but outside of this week, when we look down the road, when the fields are stronger, but we still have guys that we kind of know how they're playing. If for these Korn Ferry Tour guys, you're kind of getting your first glimpse of them. So when we turn around and they're getting in the 7K range, the 6K range, then at that point you're starting to get more comfortable with them. And I think that we can lean on that down the road as well.
Yeah, and not so much and kind of making the mental notes on golfers that look well, but I'm not really talking about it. What I'm talking about is what habits can we take from this tournament on just a DFS wise, and then carry into the rest of the season, maybe when it starts off at Kapalua. So what I mean by that, and I'll give you guys an example. the kind of DFS rounders who go MLB, NBA, NFL, PJ, all that. These professionals that can kind of do well in each sport, and they come to golf, and they probably don't know what SGBS means. I mean, strokes gained, ball striking. They probably have no idea what they do, because the one thing they really put emphasis on is the game that we're playing is not just 100% solely handicapping golf. That's why there's some great golf bettors who are terrible at DFS. And there's some terrible golf bettors that make a ton of money in DFS. And the specific reason is we have to understand what game we're playing. And so if we kind of believe, if I believe I'm a great golf handicapper, that kind of belief actually can get me in trouble within DFS. So we really kind of want to almost humble ourselves just to remind ourselves that what game are we actually playing? This week is going to be a perfect example with a guy like Mito Pereira, who's going to be complete chalk. Everyone is already talking about it. And can he win this tournament? Yeah, of course he can kind of win this tournament. But ownership in this tournament is going to be so condensed because of the unknowns, the players we have no information on or very little, and the players that we kind of just have some information, like Mito and Rogers and Guido, all those guys we're familiar with. The ownership's going to be condensed with them. And what we say every single week is that, okay, when there's a lot of unknowns and there's new guys, we want some of security, so we go to that. And so the point being is, please be mindful when you're making these lineups to say, my goal, my game I'm actually playing is I'm trying to find leverage with basing off my decisions on what other people are likely going to do. And we forget that often when we get into these big tournaments, like we get into the majors or the Players, the Honda, all the tournaments in the Florida Swing, all these great tournaments, Memorial, because we have all this great strokes gained data, and every podcast just beats it down your throat, even we do. And so it's great for handicapping, but great handicapping for golf doesn't get you the whole way in kind of DFS. So that's what I'm really saying, is that please, be mindful of that, and just be kind of very aware of, as you're building lineups this week, how are you doing it different? And how would you like it to maybe continue these habits you're including this week into tournaments kind of in the future? And so I say, don't talk yourself into players this week. Let your strategy kind of pick your player seed. So if you're doing the game theory strategy, and I should probably preface this, that if you're a 3-entry max or single entry player this week, I would strongly recommend, if you can stay within your means, to kind of mass enter or enter as much as you can. So let's just say you enter in the $5 3-entry max. It's $15. Maybe you go into the quarter 150 max and you enter as many lineups as you can using just this strategy. And I want to kind of maybe challenge all the listeners. I want you guys to just pick 4 guys. It's Monday night. We don't have the ownerships. I have some preliminary ownerships I'm going to throw out. But I just want you to pick with 4 guys that are 15% owned or higher. And those are the only 4 guys you can play or put in your pool if you're entering 100 lineups. So for right now, and preliminary ownerships on a different site, Mito's at 20, likely going to get higher.
Yeah.
Then we have guys like Nick Hardy, Denny McCarthy, who's a putting. Guido's at 18%. I want you to say, okay, because everyone's going to build lineups, and you're going to see it. Ownership is going to be so condensed in these lineups where there's going to be more duped lineups this week. You're going to see lineups where the ownership kind of cumulative number is going to be in the hundreds, which is just bad. It's going to be way above 70. So I really want to think you just once ownership, pick 4 guys over 15 that you can put in your player pool, and then spread it around with guys like a David Hearn, who's right now at 8%, or Lahiri at 5%, because you can get so much leverage. And because there's so many unknowns, then why are you risking money and the ownership number for a guy there's already so many unknowns? It just doesn't make sense. So don't buy into groupthink. You're going to hear a lot of people kind of go in this week about strokes gained and this is why you have to play this pick. Everyone's going to talk about Mito. Everyone's going to talk about Knox. And it makes sense because the stroke teams back it up, but we're not playing that game. And this isn't a tournament that we're in the Florida swing where we play 4 straight tournaments in a row. This is a tournament where we're just in Bermuda, and some golfers we haven't even seen since the Wyndham. A lot of golfers we haven't seen there. Some haven't been off in 3 weeks. Some we haven't even seen since almost a year. So why buy stock in the strokes gain data when there's so much inconsistency? And Drew you just said really well that people have come in off multiple miscuts. So there's one other thing I'm going to talk about, but I just threw all that out to you, Drew. Anything else you think about that? Or what are your just thoughts when we're just trying to build lineups this week?
No, I think that I can speak for, I don't want to speak for everybody, but the way that you kind of discuss that and talk through it makes a whole lot of sense, right? If any week, this should be the week where there's going to be value kind of going the opposite way. Find your strategy, pick your guys. And yeah, to your point, the more lineups that you can put in with a field like this is a benefit for you. And it's going to be, I feel like FanShare's got with the ownership projections is going to be a very interesting week from their perspective.
Yeah.
Just because
this is an amazing week to have FanShare. This is when FanShare is when we need it.
Because I mean, you look at this field and it's hard to pinpoint a projection ownership. But yeah, to your point, the Mito number, those numbers are going to be 25, 30% because everybody's going to sit back and pick 3-4 guys that they feel comfortable with at the top. But yeah, the more lineups you can put in, I think it's beneficial this week. And to your point, we look back at the tournament that was the last 2 years here, and there's really the strokes gain data did nothing for us, right? It really didn't. I mean, you got guys missing 3-4 cuts in a row. How does that strokes gain data, how is that beneficial to us in the last 2 years? It wasn't. It was absolutely irrelevant. And so this is the week that if you can find a guy, you can find the flyer, you can get multiple lineups with multiple different people in it. If you want to build your core and then have, those 3-4 guys, but then, plug and play different guys based off what you like and not just beat the data to death. I actually think that there's like a fresh feeling about it too. You know what I mean? Like we always are like so focused on these numbers because it's hard to not be because they're in place to kind of give us an edge, when we're putting this out. But we know this tournament. We've seen what the winners of this tournament have been coming into, and it's kind of like a reset feeling for me to where I'm kind of letting my eyes and my feelings, and I know we want to have some concrete evidence behind what we're going in with, but to my own detriment that I will strokes gain myself into certain players that I shouldn't have, and then I feel silly after the week. So it's kind of refreshing to maybe to step back, take a different stance this week, take a different look into how you're building the lineups and kind of go from there.
Yeah, and I love how you said that a fresh slate. That's exactly how we want to see every single tournament. And trust me, I love strokes gain information. I love projections. It's so helpful, especially in cash games. That you can rely on your projections in cash games and do really, really well. But within GPPs, it's just vital. So yeah, we want to see this as it's a fresh start. We don't know much about anything of these golfers. We have very little information. And so I'm not just saying, let's go out and blindly pick golfers who are low owned. I'm not saying that. I'm saying let's construct lineups that have a part of our handicapping. So if we love Seamus Power this week and we have a lot of maybe data behind it or a lot of part of our strategy likes him, then we say go overweight, but then only 3 golfers above 15%, because again, the low owned guys are going to be so spread out. Ownership's going to be so condensed this week that all you need is 4. Because
I think I saw Brian Gay was at like 1.4 or 1.6% owned when he won here last year.
Yeah,
which is that's just insane.
And if we could I wish we could pull that lineup up. I would guarantee that I'm sure there's a chalky guy in there, but the other again, probably 3 other golfers are going to be under 10% in that winning lineup. And so that is what we're going to see this week. This winning lineup is going to be likely not even close to being duped. So that's just what I'm saying. And please remember this. Like I think if you follow this strategy, we can't predict how DFS players do, but I think there's a small chance you're going to have a better DFS week this week than any week. Maybe I should say there's a higher opportunity for you to win a GPP this week than the other week if you do this strategy, because people, frankly, I'm not trying to be mean, people are going to be dumb this week and make a lot of stupid decisions. Like I pulled up Hank Lebioda, who missed 4 straight cuts, and he's going to be 16% owned. And again, this is just preliminary. Well, yeah, he has good course history. His game kind of fits over the long haul, but that's a huge. If he was 1%, I'd say, yeah, well, he had a good course history. We can kind of play with that. But if he's 16%, that's a huge reason to bet against and fade. And so people are buying in on guys. It's just dumb. You're buying in on that ownership. So remember, Key, that ownership is the real salary this week.
Yeah.
Not what DK is giving you. And
yeah,
so then go ahead.
Yeah, if you have a guy that's 16, so say you're in a toss-up when you're trying to build your core, right? And you have a guy with similar, what you feel is similar. So say it's Hank Lebioda and somebody that's going to be 5% owned. Why not go with the 5% owned guy? It doesn't make it, there's really no, unless Hank Lebioda, if he's going to be 18% owned and he's coming in on 4 missed cuts, and first of all, you can't play the narrative of, oh, hey, we got to pick a guy that's been playing like crap either. Right. That's just silly. But yeah, if you're between 2 guys this week, I think the ownership is almost more important than any other week, because like a lot of the weeks, if we can pick a guy that we feel really confident, even if they're super highly owned, I'm not sure that guy actually exists this week. And maybe you can talk yourself into it, but it's not like we're playing Morikawa, that's going to be 22% owned, and we feel that confident about it. So if you're between player A and player B, and player B is 10% less owned than player A, it just makes sense, especially this week. And of course, that's something that you probably want to think in and you look in every week. But to your point, that's where FanShare comes in, and that's huge when you're building on Wednesday, when you kind of have those final projected ownership numbers. That's where it's super valuable.
Yeah, and I'm just going to pull up an example real quick before we move on and run through the player pool real quick. I pulled up my lineup that did really well last week, even with Ortiz withdrawing. So yeah, I had Hideki, who was almost 30%. He was 28%. So you're like, okay, there's a chalk guy. But just like we talked about last week, the game theory aspect, Fleetwood was the lowest owned guy in the 10K and above range by a lot. Like it was by like 6 or 7 percentage point. Fleetwood went off at 10% owned when we got like Xander and Colin, we're in the 20s. So we got a huge discount. So there, and Fleetwood wasn't playing that well. He had an okay, CJ Cup finished in the 40s, kind of played decent at the Alfred Dunhill links. But we're like, okay, well, the margins are so razor thin with these golfers. Let's take that, and this is part of the weekly strategy, and it pays off. That okay, I'm going to buy in Fleetwood at this ownership discount. Fleetwood finished T7, was the best guy in the 10K range outside of Hideki. Obviously had Matt Jones, who finished 18. But the real guys that I love Sam Ryder. We talked about him. He actually led the field in birdie or bet, and he went off at 4%. But Brendan Steele was a wild card. Brendan Steele was 7,100. So when everyone was flocking to CT Pan and Vegas way above him, I kind of went down to Brendan Steele. One, because he kind of drives the ball well, but he was not playing that well. But I'm talking when ownership was so condensed in a 70-horse field, and we get a guy like Brendan Steele who has some back class at 5%, I said, sign me up. Give me that 5% because that's going to help me win a GPP. And Brendan Steele went off and finished T2 and won somebody a GPP. So it's that type of mindset we want to take week to week. And you're going to more likely have it this week than any other week because of the unknowns. So let's remember that the rest of the year. Well, Drew, let's run through the board. I'm only going to talk about maybe kind of 5 golfers or so. But one of them's in the 10K range. So we'll just start. What about 10K and above? Power to up to Fitzpatrick. What are you thinking?
Yeah, to your point, the one 10K guy that I'm actually going to be playing or in at least that I like is actually a Seamus Power. Form's been okay, right? I think his game fits this golf course well, right? So he was 21st at the Shriners. He's second in strokes gained total in the field. So he's got a well-rounded game. And I think to ownership wise that we've been referencing, he will be the lowest own in this 10K range. And he's actually had some decent course history, 2 top 40s. So he knows the place well. I think he can play in the wind pretty well in the 10K range. That's the only bullet I'm pulling in that range. Matt Fitzpatrick being the highest valued player in this field kind of speaks to the field that we're dealing with. But Seamus Power will be the only play for me in the 10K range, and probably very sparingly.
Yeah, and I'll roll into bet. I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, and to the preliminary set it too. And it's a guy I really like, but I think Reed's going to be the lowest owned guy in the 10K range. Right now, he's at 9.4 and Power's at 16%. And it's not even the ownership that I like with Reed. That's a plus. Reed actually kind of fits well within the conditions we may see. So within windy courses, so the courses that we've seen above 15 miles per hour wind, and a lot higher, Patrick Reed over the last 50 rounds ranks 4th in strokes gained total within high wind kind of scoring. So Patrick Reed, that tells me he can kind of play well in the wind. He's around the green. He's a wizard around the green. We like him. Pretty decent on Bermuda. Again, hasn't been playing well. He's coming off that kind of illness that we see. But I really like Patrick Reed. And if he's going to be under 10%, when Mito's going to be 25 likely, and Bezadenut's going to be high, and Fitzpatrick's going to be high, and Power's going to be somewhere in the middle, I love in DFS riding with Reed right now. He's going to be a staple, and it reminds me just what we talked about with Fleetwood last week. So I like Reed a lot. This is the time I'm going to jump back on him, and it kind of fits like a Reed course does well on Bermuda. So anything else before we move down to 9K?
No, I'm good with that.
Who do you like 9K and the 9K range?
The guy that I'm going to go to, which I'm usually not a huge fan of, but I do kind of like the way he sits up here is going to be Danny Willett. Last 5, he's actually been playing pretty well. He had a good finish at the Shriners, 21st
in the Euro Tour.
And he did get the win in the Euro Tour. And talk about a guy whose game is kind of under the radar, been coming back. We know that he has a green jacket, which you could argue Spieth should be the owner of, but his game was really, ever since that point, kind of went down into a dark place. But he's the one thing that we've seen, he struggled off the tee slightly, and I think that's somewhat negated on his shorter golf course, right? We're not having to pull driver as much as we would on any given week. So the off the tee statistics, I do like the importance of hitting fairways. But at the same time, when you're dialing back to hybrid 3-wood iron off some of these tees, the opportunity to hit the fairway goes way up. And again, as far as with the putter with Danny Willett, he doesn't really have a great surface. He's going to need a hot week, but I do like his chances here. Again, the game really, if you look back from 2016 to 2017 all the way through to 2019, it was just terrible. And now you start to see things climbing up. I don't think he'll be super highly owned in this 9K range. So I will go with Danny Willett here. And again, for me, a lot of the guys that I will probably be playing are going to be in that 7K range. There's not a whole lot I love here. What are you seeing here in this range?
Well, I'm seeing it, and I see a lot of bets with it, and he's a much better bet than he is DFS play. But in DFS, why are we playing not Mito, that's 2, but Guido?
Yeah.
Why are we playing him? He's a great bet. If you like him, I'm sure, and there's plenty of upside with the guy. He's super talented. And so, bet him. But at 18% or higher at these preliminary ownerships, why? We only have 3 measured strokes gains rounds with him.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, it's like such a small sample size. So your strokes gain can say, oh my gosh, well, yeah, he gained 3 strokes on approach at the Travelers, finished 4th at the U.S. Open. This guy's solid. Well, yeah, he is solid. So bet him. But is he worth 18%? That is one of the most expensive golfers then in the field. No, so don't play him. I'd rather go to Thomas Dietrich, nobody knows about, and also been playing well on the Euro Tour. I love your Danny Willett call, but that's all I'm going to say in the 9K range. So are you cool with jumping down to the 8K?
Yeah, let's do it. So There's a couple guys that I would consider playing here. So Ryan Armour, I would consider playing. He has some course history. Ryan Armour, again, there's some things that he does really well that we can sit here. And I don't want to do this strokes gain thing and bore everybody to death. But Ryan Armour is a nice play at the low 8K, high 7K range. There's been times where he's slipped up, and we've actually seen it where I forgot what tournament it was. He was in the high 8K range, and I'm just have no interest, and he fell flat on his face. But I do like Ryan Armour here. He struggles around the greens, but again, I think with the distance of the golf course, I don't feel like around the green something that we need to value as much this week. But the guy that I do like in this range is Steven Yeager. And he's a guy that I've played a little bit of, kind of an under the radar guy. And he's another guy, if you want to sit here and just look at strokes gain, he's not going to, kind of flash out at you, but he's a really good putter. We always talk about how putting travels, and I like Steven Yeager here. And I think he's going to be a guy that'll be relatively low owned in that range as well.
Yeah, I like Yeager's a great call. I really like Bramlett. But maybe the guy I really like is a fellow Pepperdine Wave, and that's the Gala. So if you want to throw out a narrative there, he's used to playing on the coast in high winds. Pepperdine's in Malibu on the coast. Literally, the campus is literally on the ocean almost. So I like the Gala. He kind of hurt people earlier in the fall swing, so I think we'll get him a low ownership. And lastly, the guy at the very bottom of the 8K range, David Lipsky, is really interesting. But let's move on down to 7K range. That's a little bit bigger range. And now we're getting interesting. A lot of kind of guys to lean. Who are you looking at?
Yeah. So for me, and this is a guy that we've talked about quite a bit, and a guy I think we're both rooting for, but I think this is a great place to play Nick Watney. Really, if you look at the way it's funny, you can see based off when you filter how Nick Watney's played the last 50 rounds to 24 rounds, you can see that his game is completely flipped around. And we've talked about it. Bermuda's his best surface. He had a great finish at Sanderson, and he's just been playing extremely well recently as we've watched. In the 7,000 range, I'm good with playing Nick Watney this week. And I think he'll have a good week. Ownership-wise, it's something to keep an eye on. Because Nick Watney is a name that people will know, and that might have some people, definitely making clicks in the Nick Watney range. But if the ownership's not terrible, I think that he's a very solid play this week. But again, you got to keep an eye on that because there's a point where if it gets too high, then it's not value at that point anymore.
Yeah. There is one other guy I should have mentioned the 8K range because he just has immaculate course history. He has a T4, T15, and he's one of the best putters on the planet, and that's Denny McCarthy. Likely going to be chalk, but I just would be dumb if we didn't mention Denny McCarthy. There's two guys in the 7K range, one of which I'm going to talk a little bit longer, just real quick. That's Matthew Neesmith. We talk about him every week. He's an incredible ball striker. We said at the beginning of the show, ball striking, if you're hitting the ball well, it's more likely to be less affected by the wind. So really kind of like Neesmith there. Eckroat is really interesting. He's another guy who traditionally is going to hit the ball striking wise, the best in the field. And that's all it for me. People who were love Vincent Whaley, last summer, you can come back to him, but I'm actually might ride Anirban Lahiri. Anirban had good course history here where he actually, got a T11 last year. He withdrew. He withdrew in 2020, so we didn't know how he finished. But a T11 for Anirban, he's definitely going to go low owned. So, Drew, are you comfortable going down to the sicko range? # Blatant Golf to the 6K and below.
Yeah. One other guy I'll mention real quick that I think is an interesting play would be Harry Hall. This is a guy fresh off the KFT tour. He had a nice finish at Shriners where he gained 9 strokes total, so his game's in decent shape at 7,200. Not a household name whatsoever. Again, he struggles with approach, but I don't want to your point, I don't want to look into these things too much because this is such a shorter golf course where these numbers are going to be somewhat skewed. But again, I don't think that he's going to be a name that necessarily will be huge ownership. So I might be playing some Harry Hall as well.
Yeah. I like that. So, yeah, any other guy in the 6K range? Or now starting the 6K, I mean, who do you like?
Adam Svensson.
The Spencer, yeah.
Yeah, he's been a guy that I've been keeping an eye on, and a really good ball striker, right? He's third in the field in the last 24 ball striking wise. You just hit it on the head when we talked about, kind of the way the ball striking, is going to help this week. But in the last 24, he's sixth in strokes gained approach. So he's hitting a good tee to green ball striking wise. The one thing with him is the putter. It's not great. But again, we can't, especially in the 6K range, if you sit here and you try to find somebody statistically that's going to blow you away, it's not going to probably happen. So, but I will go with Adam Svensson in this range. He's probably my most comfortable play. And that's at 6,900. I know you'll probably dive down a little deeper in this range, which I'm excited to hear about. I've seen Luke Donald talk. Are you Luke Donald guy at all this week?
Well, Luke Donald, and he's even said it. So his approach numbers for his last couple tournaments that has even gone back to this last spring. He's hit well on approach. He is not doing, because he even admittedly said he's been chasing distance, is off the tee numbers are so great, or aren't so great, excuse me. And so if that continues, I don't like Luke Donald, but we've seen him do well on coastal courses. Harbor Town has been thrown out as a comp course. Like, I don't see that at all. Sure, Bermuda and it's on the coast, but Harbor Town is a whole different animal than what we'll see. This
Harbor Town is a placement golf course. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm out on Luke Donald as well. I was just curious.
Right, but I've seen that comp course. I'm like, Harbor Town, no, it is not a comp course to this.
I think distance-wise, people just want to throw it in there just because it's relatively short. But Harbor Town, you can be in the fairway and be blocked out by a tree. It's a completely different element than the resort-style seaside course that we're heading towards this week.
And Harbor Town could play longer because you can't cut the corner or whatever. Yeah, but
Harbor Town, by the way, is a staple, fantastic course that is one of my favorite that's in the rotation.
Oh yeah, my family goes to Hilton Head almost every year, and we get to Harbor Town all the time. And gosh, it's so much fun. It is so much fun. But anyway, I'm going to go through. I'll talk more on Twitter this week about these guys. But Kurt Kitayama is really interesting. Like him, who am I going down? Yeah, you mentioned Donald, Brandon Wu, not Dylan. Brandon is super interesting. I actually liked him at this event last year. Didn't play all that well. You're going to hear Chase Seifert's name a lot. I get it. Interesting. We might get a two-glove Tommy Gainey sighting if he's not hitting up the strip clubs or the massage parlors like Tommy Gainey. Really like Ben Martin, the Clemson grad. Really like Ben Martin. Haven't seen him in a while. Is a great putter. John Pack is another young guy that's interesting. A guy we haven't heard from in a long time. Sung Yul No. This course traditionally fits.
Great name.
There's one, Fabian Gomez, guy who won at Memphis a long, long time ago. Might see him. And then lastly, who's had some troubles, and he's even admitted it. I think it might be injury, but David Lingmerth, I might throw a few shekels on him. And then Ted Potter, maybe. Hasn't been playing well at all, but we saw him won the lefty at San Diego. We'll throw a few shares on him. These guys go in at 1% or less owned. And if you get one of them in the top 10, could break the slate. So anything wrapping up, you Drew, that you had in mind?
No, man, that's it. Again, I'm sure we'll throw some stuff out on Twitter, but interesting week. I think you talked through your strategy really, really well. So hopefully people were listening, and hopefully, we see some things posted, come Sunday that people had some successful weeks. And yeah, this is a week to try to maybe pivot off some of the things that you've been doing that, may not have been working, and try to reset and refocus, and let's cash one. Yeah.
And remember to keep telling yourself when you're making lineups, say, make GPP winning lineups, make GPP winning lineups. And I just wanted to talk about Mito real quick. And I think you should bet him, especially if you're worried about, FOMO, missing him out on any wins. And can he win? Sure. But if we're going with our strategy, there's more signs to me to bet against because he's so expensive with the ownership than to, you know, to go overweight on that stupid ownership number, which we'll likely see, and FanShare will come out with it. First, if this is going to be a putting contest, like Drew, like you said, and I agree, man, he's been struggling
Terrible.
with the putter. Lost 3.9
Yes.
at the Shriners, 4.7 to Sanderson Farms. Not great on Bermuda. It's very tight between Bermuda and POA, which is his worst surface. And it's just hard for me to do that. If he was 10% owned, I would maybe lock Mito in, but it's just I can't do it. And so I'm trying to rationalize or kind of more explain the strategy when you're going to go through these guys. But remember, I guess the big thing to remember, is that the ownership number is the salary this week. And if you can, try to stay for maybe 5 guys under over 15%, and that's it. That's your cap.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I'm interested to see come Wednesday night what Mito's numbers at, because I think it's going to be pretty ridiculous, because stats tell you to play him. But to your point, Shriners, he lost almost 4 strokes on the greens the week, but at Sanderson he lost almost 5. That's not good. And so ball striking wise, it's there, but you know, a well below average putter and what probably is going to be a putting contest at super high ownership. It's probably not a DFS play, but from an outright standpoint or a placing standpoint, it makes a lot of sense.
No doubt. Well, Drew, appreciate you all listening, and good luck, everybody. This is a great DFS week, and let's cash some tickets. All right.